So, how do you prepare for the inevitable? You know, it's a question that feels so incredibly modern, but people have been wrestling with it for centuries. Today, we're going to take a journey into a really fascinating historical text that offers one very specific and very direct answer.
So, our guide for this little explainer is a book that was published way back in 1843. It's called Preparation for Death, and it's basically a collection of meditations and rules designed to lead the reader toward what the author saw as a good death, and by doing that, a good life. And let me tell you, it does not pull any punches, as you're about to find out.
Right from the get-go, the book sets the tone with this quote. This isn't about sugarcoating things or finding comfort in nice words. The message is crystal clear. If you really want to prepare for death, you first have to be willing to look it right in the eye, in all its raw, physical reality. Now, this whole journey starts in a pretty surprising place. You'd think the first step would be spiritual advice or some kind of prayer, right? Nope. It's an absolutely unflinching look at pure physical mortality. The core idea here is that you can't really get ready spiritually if you don't first understand the raw, biological process of decay. The book basically argues that you can't rise above the body until you fully accept what the body is eventually going to become. What's really striking is just how brutally honest the text is. It literally walks the reader through these stages of decomposition, step by step, in graphic detail. Now, the point isn't just to be morbid. It's to strip away every last bit of vanity and force you to face a fundamental truth. We are dust, and to dust we will return. Okay, so after you've confronted that physical reality, the book argues that your whole perspective on life's priorities is forced to change. Why? Because in the end, death is the ultimate leveler. And this illustrates that point perfectly. In life, you couldn't have two people more different than the prince and the peasant. But in the grave, all those distinctions of wealth, power, and status just vanish. You can't tell them apart. The book uses this powerful image to make you ask, what is the real value of the things we chase in life if they all just end up as indistinguishable bones? And to really hammer this point home, the book tells the story of the great Sultan Saladin. As he was dying, he ordered that his simple burial shroud be paraded through the streets, and a crier would announce to everyone that this single piece of cloth was all that the powerful conqueror would take with him from his entire vast empire. So, here's the crucial point, the big takeaway from all this. If all the material wealth, all the fame, and all the power just turns to dust, then the only things that can possibly have any lasting value are things of the spirit. And this is really the turning point of the entire guide. This brings us to the practical, kind of how-to section of the book. So it's already established the why, that worldly things are temporary, and now it gives a very specific how, a spiritual toolkit for getting yourself prepared. So who wrote this anyway? The author was Saint Alphonsus Liguori. He was a bishop, and he founded a religious order. His whole goal was to provide a clear, methodical path that pretty much anyone could follow to achieve what he called spiritual perfection. And he boils it all down to these three main tools. Now, he says they're all important, but he puts a huge emphasis on that first one, mental prayer, which he says is morally necessary. So, what on earth is mental prayer? Well, it's not just reciting words from a book. It's a really disciplined, structured meditation. Think of it as a deep, internal conversation that involves reflecting on big truths, stirring up emotions, which he calls affections, making specific requests or petitions, and then forming firm resolutions to change your actions. And he breaks down this whole practice into a very clear three-step process. First, you start by preparing your mind with humility and asking for insight. Then, you get to the core meditation, where you reflect on something until it leads to those feelings, requests, and resolutions. And finally, you wrap it up by giving thanks and asking for the strength to actually follow through on what you resolved. It's like a complete mental and spiritual work. But you might be wondering, why go through all this intense, lifelong preparation? Well, in this final section, we see how the book frames the answer in the starkest terms possible. It's all about the eternal fate of your soul. Yeah, there is no middle ground in this 19th century guide. According to the author, life is a journey, a path. And at the moment of death, that path splits into one of only two possible and permanent destinations. And this is where the stakes get really high. For the sinner, death is this moment of darkness, confusion, and hardened regret. But for the just, the ones who have done all this preparation, death isn't something to be feared. It's a joyful embrace, a final union with the spiritual reality they've spent their entire lives working toward.
So, what do we take away from all this? Is this just some historical artifact, a 19th century manual for a particular way of life? Or does its unflinching demand that we confront our own mortality actually touch on a universal, timeless fear? Maybe the real question it leaves us with isn't just about how to prepare for death, but what that kind of preparation tells us about how we ought to live right now.